Now there's the President, Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of the United States. We're going to be talking about him. How y'all folks doing this fine day? It's Gator here at the cable company, and today we're going to talk about the Civil War era, okay? Let's get into it right away. Let's don't waste any time. The United States of America, Civil War era, 1849 to 1865. 31 Star Flag, 1851 to 1858. Location, United States, including antebellum era, Third Great Awakening, the prelude to the Civil War, American Civil War, migrations, American frontier, Mormon pioneers, westward expansion trade trails, and the presidents were Zachary Taylor, Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, James Buchanan, Abraham Lincoln, and Andrew Johnson. Key events were California Gold Rush, the Compromise of 1850, Kansas-Nebraska Act, Bleeding Kansas, Dred Scott decision, formation of the Confederacy, American Civil War, Emancipation Proclamation, assassination of Abraham Lincoln, history of the United States, 1815 to 1849, and 1865 to 1917. History of the United States from 1849 to 1865 was dominated by the tensions that led to the American Civil War between the North and the South, and the bloody fighting in 1861 to 1865 that produced Northern victory in the war and ended slavery. At the same time, industrialization and the transportation revolution changed the economics of the Northern United States and the Western United States. Heavy immigration from Western Europe shifted the center of population further to the north. Industrialization went forward in the Northeast from Pennsylvania to New England. A rail network and a telegraph network linked the nations economically, opening up new markets. Immigration brought millions of European workers and farmers to the northern United States. In the southern United States, planters shifted operations and slaves from the poor soils of the southeastern United States to the rich cotton lands of the southwestern United States. The issues of slavery in the new territories acquired in the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848, were temporarily resolved by the Compromise of 1850, the Compromise. One provision, the Fugitive Slave Law, sparked intense controversy as revealed in the enormous interest in the plight of the escaped slave in Uncle Tom's Cabin, and in 1852, anti-slavery novel and play. In 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act reversed long-standing compromises by providing that each new state of the Union would decide its posture on slavery, popular sovereignty. The newly formed Republican Party stood against the expansion of slavery and won control of most northern states, winning enough electoral votes to win the presidency in 1860. The invasion of Kansas by sponsored pro and anti-slavery factions intent on voting slavery up or down with resulting bloodshed, bloody Kansas, angered both North and South. The Supreme Court tried unsuccessfully to resolve the issue of slavery in the territories with a pro-slavery ruling in Dred Scott versus Sanford that angered the North. After the 1860 election of Republican Abraham Lincoln, 7 southern states declared their secession from the United States between the late 1860s and 1861, establishing a rebel government, the Confederate States of America, on February 9, 1861. The Civil War began when Confederate General Pierre Beauregard opened fire upon Union troops at Fort Sumter in South Carolina. 4 more states seceded as Lincoln called for troops to fight an insurrection. The next 4 years were the darkest in American history, as the nation tore at itself using the latest military technology and highly motivated soldiers. The urban, industrialized northern states, the Union, eventually defeated the mainly rural agricultural southern states, the Confederacy, but between 600,000 and 700,000 American soldiers on both sides combined were killed, and much of the infrastructure of the South was devastated. About 8% of all white males aged 13 to 43 died in the war, including 6% in the North, and as extraordinary 18% in the South. In the end, slavery was abolished and the Union was restored richer and more powerful than ever, while the South was embittered and improvised. Flag of the Confederate States of America. Aspect ratio 2.3. Flag of the Confederate States of America, March 4, 1865. Used from March 4, 1865 until the Confederacy's disbandment. Seal 1863 to 1865 of the Confederate States of America. Federal Union and Southern States. In this map of the division of the states in the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, blue indicates the Northern Union states, and light blue represents the 5 Union supporting Southern slave states, border states. That primary state in Union control, though Kentucky and Missouri had dual competing Confederate and Unionist governments. Red represents Southern seceded states in rebellion, also known as the Confederate States of America. Uncolored areas were U.S. territories, with the exception of the Indian Territory, which is present-day Oklahoma. Evolution of the Confederate States between December 1860 and July 1870. Alexander H. Stephens, Confederate Vice President and author of the Cornerstone Speech. William L. Yancey, Alabama Fire Eater, the orator of secession. William Henry Gist, governor of South Carolina, called the Secessionist Convention. The inauguration of Jefferson Davis in Montgomery, Alabama. George Washington Postage Stamps, 1861, issued 10 cents. 20-cent George Washington CSA stamp. Ellis Barnett, a Cherokee sensationalist and Confederate representative in the Indian Territory of present-day Oklahoma. Northwest side of the Capitol in Montgomery, Alabama. Virginia State Capitol front view, 1865. William T. Sutherland's mansion in Dansville, Virginia, was the temporary residence of Jefferson Davis and dubbed the last capital of the Confederacy. Portrait of John Russell in 1792 to 1878. It still has symbols of an independent agricultural confederacy surrounding the equestrian Washington, sword encased. Navy Jack, light blue cross, also square canton, white fly. The battle flag, square. Recruitment poster, do not wait to be drafted, under half re-enlisted. $50 bounty. Unionists throughout the Confederate States resisted the 1862 conscription. General Gabriel J. Rains, Conscription Bureau Chief, April 1862 to May 1863. General Gideon J. Pillow, military recruiter under Bragg, then J.E. Johnston, 200. Bombardment of Fort Sumter, Charleston Harbor, 12th and 13th of April 1861. Library of Congress, Prints and Photographs Division, Washington, D.C. The painting captured of Richards Battery, depicting action during the first battle of the Bull Run, one of the early battles of the American Civil War. The painting is oil on plywood. Battle of Antietam, Army of the Potomac, General G.O.B. McClellan. Burial of one of dead on the Antietam battlefield. Print shows a battle scene between the ironclad Monitor and the Merrimac just offshore. Also shows a Union ship sinking and rescue boats being pulled in the sea from shore, as well as Union artillery bunker, Union soldiers and officers, and some rescued sailors. In Battle of Mobile Bay, the ruins in Richmond, damage to Franklin Paper Mill and Arsenal in Richmond, Virginia, from the American Civil War. Courthouse, Virginia, federal soldiers at the courthouse, April 1865. Pendleton Murray, governor of Texas. Flag of 1861, verse. On January 11, 1861, Alabama Secession Convention passed a resolution designating an official flag. Flag of Florida, 1861, adopted during the American Civil War, designed by Governor Perry. Non-official flag of the United States of Georgia, used before 1879, based on the gift version file. Flag of Louisiana, February 11, 1861. The flag of Mississippi, January 26, 1861 to August 22nd, 1865. It remained the unofficial flag until 1894 when the current flag was adopted, according to Clay Moss, Mississippi Department of Archives and History. Flag of North Carolina, 1861 to 1865. Flag of South Carolina, 1861 to 1865. Flag of Texas. Flag of the Commonwealth of Virginia, as it was in 1861. Flag 1861, verse, on January 11, 1861, the Alabama Session Convention passed a resolution designating an official flag, non-official flag of the United States of Georgia, used before 1879. Flag of Louisiana, February 11, 1861. Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederacy from 1861 to 1865. Davis Cabinet in 1861. Alabama front row, left to right. Judah P. Benjamin, Stephen Mallory, Alexander H. Stevens, Jefferson Davis, John Henninger Reagan, and Robert Toombs. Provisional Congress, Montgomery, Alabama. Jesse J. Finley, Florida District. Henry R. Jackson, Georgia District. Asa Biggs, North Carolina District. Andrew McGarth, South Carolina District. John H. Reagan, Postmaster General. Jefferson Davis, 5 cents, the first stamp, 1861. Andrew Jackson, 2 cents, 1862. George Washington, 20 cents, 1863. New Orleans in 1841. This is in Richmond, where the Confederacy made heavy guns. The Union had large advantages in men and resources at the start of the war. The ratio grew steadily in favor of the Union. Main railroads of the Confederacy, 1861, colors show the different gauges tracked with. The top railroad shown in the upper right is the Baltimore and Ohio, which was all the time a Union railroad. Passers-by abused the bodies of Union supporters near Knoxville, Tennessee. The two were hanged by Confederate authorities near the railroad tracks so passing trains passengers could see them. In the 1862 $10 CSA note depicts a vignette of hope flanked by RMT Hunter and C.G. Memminger. Richmond Bread Riot, 1863. Potter House, Atlanta, Georgia. Downtown Charleston, South Carolina. Navy Yard, Newport, Virginia. Rail Bridge, Petersburg, Virginia. This Confederate memorial tombstone at Nasdaq City Cemetery is in Nasdaq, Mississippi. First national flag, 7, 9, 11, 13 stars. Stars and bars. The second national flag, Richmond Capitol, the stainless banner. Third national flag, never flown, blood-stained banner. The CSA Naval Jack, 1863-65. Battle flag, Southern Cross. This Confederate battle flag pattern is one of the most often thought of as a Confederate flag. It is one of many used by the Confederate Armed Forces. Map of the county secession votes, 1860-1861, in Appalachia within the ARC definition. Virginia and Tennessee show the public votes, while the other states show the vote by county delegates to the conventions. Colonel James B. Brownlow. Map of the states and territories claimed by the Confederate States of America. A home on Mississippi. St. John's Episcopal Church, Montgomery. Major General John C. Breckinridge, Secretary of War, 1865. General Robert E. Lee, General-in-Chief, 1865. Jefferson F. Davis, June 3, 1808 to December 6, 1889, was an American politician who served as the first and only president of the Confederate States from 1861 to 1865. He represented Mississippi in the United States Senate and in the House of Representatives as a member of the Democratic Party before the American Civil War. He was the United States Secretary of War from 1853 to 1857. Abraham Lincoln was elected United States President and took office in March 1861. Jefferson Davis was elected President of the Confederate States on February 18, 1861. The two presidents governed the two countries throughout the 4 years of the American Civil War until the surrender of the Confederacy in April 1865. Robert Edward Lee, January 19, 1807 to October 12, 1870, was a Confederate general during the American Civil War, toward the end of which he was appointed the overall commander of the Confederate States Army. He led the Army of Northern Virginia, the Confederacy's most powerful army, from 1862 until it surrendered in 1865, earning a reputation as a skilled tactician. A son of a Revolutionary War officer, Henry Lighthorse Harry Lee III. Lee was a top graduate of the United States Military Academy and an exceptional officer and military engineer in the United States Army for 32 years. He served across the United States, distinguished himself extensively during the Mexican-American War, and was superintendent of the United States Military Academy. Ulysses S. Grant, born April 27, 1822 to the July 23, 1885, was an American military officer, politician, and the 18th President of the United States, who served from 1869 to 1877. As commanding general, Grant led the Union Army to victory in the American Civil War in 1865 and briefly served as the U.S. Secretary of War. An effective civil rights executive, Grant signed a bill to create the Justice Department and worked with radical Republicans to protect African Americans during Reconstruction. Grant was born and raised in Ohio and graduated from West Point in 1843. He served with distinction in the Mexican-American War, but resigned from the Army in 1854 and returned to civilian life improvised in 1861. Shortly after the onset of the Civil War, Grant joined the Union Army and rose to prominence after securing Union victories in the Western Theater. In 1863, he led the Vicksburg Campaign that gave the Union forces control of the Mississippi River and dealt a major strategic blow to the Confederacy. President Abraham Lincoln promoted Grant to lieutenant general after his victory at Chattanooga. For 13 months, Grant fought Robert E. Lee during the high-casualty overland campaign, which ended with the capture of Lee's army at Appomattox, where he formally surrendered to Grant in 1866. President Andrew Johnson promoted Grant to General of the Army. Later, Grant openly broke with Johnson over Reconstruction policies. A war hero drawn by his sense of duty, Grant was unanimously nominated by the Republican Party and then elected president in 1868. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted shall exist in the United States or any place subject to the jurisdiction. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. It's the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolishes slavery and involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime. The amendment was passed by the Senate on April 8, 1864, by the House of Representatives on January 31, 1865, and ratified by the required 27 of then 36 states on December 6, 1865, and proclaimed on December 18th. It was the first of the three Reconstruction amendments adopted following the American Civil War. President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, effective on January 1, 1863, declared that the enslaved in the Confederate-controlled areas, and thus almost all slaves, were free. When they escaped to Union lines or federal forces, including now former slaves, advanced south, emancipation occurred without any compensation to the former owners. Texas was the last Confederate slave territory where enforcement of the proclamation was declared on June 19, 1865. In the slave-owning areas controlled by the Union forces on January 1, 1863, state action was used to abolish slavery. The exceptions were Kentucky and Delaware, and to the limited extent New Jersey, where chattel slavery and indentured servitude were finally ended by the 13th Amendment in December 1865. Well, M3 Mines on our Sunday Live, when she said New York, she wasn't too far off, was she? New Jersey. The Confederate States of America, CSA, commonly referred to as the Confederate States, the Confederacy, or the South, was an unrecognized breakaway republic in the southern United States that existed from February 8, 1861 to May 9, 1865. The Confederacy comprised 11 U.S. states that declared secession and warred against the United States during the American Civil War. The states are South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina. The Confederacy was formed on February 8, 1861 by 7 slave states: South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. All 7 are in the Deep South region of the United States, whose economy was heavily dependent upon agriculture, especially cotton, and a plantation system that relied on slave labor. The federal government in Washington, D.C., and states under its control were known as the Union. Convinced that the South's plantation economy was threatened by the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln to the United States presidency, 7 slave states seceded from the United States. No foreign government ever recognized the Confederacy as an independent country, although the United Kingdom and France granted it belligerent status. On February 8, 1861, before Lincoln took office, a provisional constitution was adopted and established a confederation government of sovereign and independent states. The Confederation functions primarily to the European Union. Prior to adopting the first Confederate Constitution, the southern states were sovereign republics: the Republic of Florida, Republic of Louisiana, Republic of Texas, etc. The Civil War began on April 12, 1861, when the South Carolina militia attacked Fort Sumter in harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. After the war began, 4 slave states of the Upper South, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, also joined the Confederacy. 4 northern slave states, Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri, remained in the Union and became known as border states. On February 22, 1862, 1 year into the war, Confederate States Army leaders reestablished a federal government in Richmond and enacted the first Confederate draft on April 16, 1862. In the cornerstone speech, Vice President Alexander H. Stephens described the new government's ideology as essentially based upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his nature and normal condition. By 1865, the Confederacy federal government dissolved into chaos. The Confederate States Congress adjourned, effectively ceasing to exist as a legislative body on March 18, after 4 years of heavy fighting. Nearly all Confederate land and naval forces either surrendered or otherwise ceased hostilities by May 1865. The war lacked a clean end date. The most significant capitulation was Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at approximately on April the 9th, after which any doubt about the war's outcome or the Confederacy's survival was extinguished. Although another large army under Confederate General Joseph E. Johnston did not formally surrender to William T. Sherman until April 26. Contemporaneously, President Lincoln was assassinated by Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth on April 14th. Confederate President Jefferson Davis' administration declared the Confederacy dissolved on May 5th and acknowledged in later writings that the Confederacy disappeared in 1865. On May 9, 1865, U.S. President Andrew Johnson officially called an end to the armed resistance in the South. Thank y'all so much for stopping in to see me today. What a wonderful experience it was to go over this. We had a blast Sunday over this topic. You can see right here, we had Rum Down Entertainment was our shout out. And we played, you had Robert E. Lee, 13th Amendment. And then this was the Vice President. And there's my little buddy, Way Too Cool, okay? Say hey to everybody, Way Too Cool.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Way Too Cool.
Come on back and see me. Bye-bye for now.